from the point of view of the environment. We are having this panel discussion against the background of our recent experience with a hurricane which has devastated the environment. So we are extremely happy that these managers we have here today have found it possible to be with us despite the challenges they would be facing in addressing environmental issues relating to the hurricane. Now, 5 agencies were invited. The Ministry of Health told us before the hurricane that they had an event planned for today. And so they could not be with us. They have always been with us. As a matter of fact, this is probably the first year we are not having them. And then Dr. Rodriguez Moody from JET told me she had an appointment for today, but wished us well for this panel discussion. All right, the reason for this panel discussion is to afford our MPA students the opportunity to hear from leaders in environmental health in Jamaica. We covered all the relevant environmental issues in the country, and we made mention of all the important agencies like NEPA, the WRA, and the NSWMA. And so they would have questions that I would not be able to adequately address with respect to what each agency does. So this panel discussion provides that opportunity for the students to listen to presentations from the various agencies represented here and to ask questions that they may have in mind to clarify issues relative to the work of these various agencies. So having said that, I'm really happy that 3 government agencies have found it possible to be with us today. And so let me go ahead and introduce the persons who are here. We have Mr. Peter Clark, the Managing Director for the Water Resources Authority. He has been extremely busy, as many of us feel that he's behind that water rising down in Manchester. So he'll have to explain himself to us and tell us how he's going to get rid of that water. But Mr. Clark has been with us for a number of years. And I had sent him an email earlier, which because of the hurricane, he never saw. I sent him another one, and this morning he called me and said, well, I'll be there. And so I was very relieved because he contributed so much to this panel discussion over the years. So we look forward to hearing from Mr. Clark. We have from the National Solid Waste Management Agency, Mr. Edson Carr. He is the Planning, Research, and Evaluation Manager. And with him, we have Ms. Jadisha Phipps, who is the Research and Evaluation Officer. And she will be the person presenting on behalf of the NSWMA. And then we have from NEPA, Ms. Fiona Lewis, who just got a big promotion by way of a new job. And her job title is a mouthful. She is the team lead for the Jamaica Coastal Area and River Basin Management Unit. It's a big name. Should attract a big salary. All right. All right. So the way we are going to proceed is that we are going to ask the representative from each agency to make a presentation explaining why we should continue to pay them to do what they are doing. And after the 3 presentations, we will have a discussion and hopefully some questions for them to answer. Given the fact that we have only 3 presenters this year as compared to 5 in previous years, we would hope to be out of here before 4 o'clock. All right, because as I said, people are extremely busy and we are really delighted to have them. So for those who may not know, our students are pursuing the Master of Public Health degree, and they come from various backgrounds. I would think that the largest group within the cohort would be medical practitioners. We have nurses, we have other categories of health staff, and the group comprises not only Jamaicans, but we have people joining us from overseas. So it's a pretty diverse group, and they're all pursuing this Master in Public Health degree. And so whatever work is done by these agencies would be of interest to them. So remember that I'm not one of the panelists. I'm not going to take the opportunity to invite our first panelist. We didn't decide on an order, but we usually say ladies for gentlemen. So, all right, no problem. Another lady from Ms. Phipps from NSWMA is ready to go. So I'm going to invite Ms. Phipps to come and address us. And then we'll have Ms. Lewis. And finally, we'll have Mr. Clark. So give Ms. Phipps a hand as she comes to present.
Do I skip?
Oh, no, Marco.
May I start? So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jadisha Phipps, Research and Evaluation Officer at the National Solid Waste Management Authority. Sure. Can you hear me? And today I'm here to present on environmental health management in Jamaica and the role NSWMA plays in that. So for the presentation, I'll just give a brief overview of NSWMA, highlight the key roles and responsibilities. I'll look at waste generation and the waste stream. Then ultimately, I'll look at the challenges in environmental health management and the solution. So the NSWMA was established in 2002 under the National Solid Waste Management Act. And we're mandated to take all steps necessary for the effective management of solid waste in Jamaica in order to safeguard public health. And by doing that, we ultimately collect, store, dispose of, transport, reuse, and reduce in an environmentally sound manner. So we have 4 regional bodies that we operate through. And these regional bodies are called the WPM region, highlighted in blue, NEPM region, highlighted in green, MPM region, highlighted in orange, and the SPM region, highlighted in red. So these regional bodies are responsible for the sweeping of roadways, collecting and transporting of solid waste, maintenance of selected bridges and public parks, and the management of the overall disposal sites. So we currently have 8 disposal sites island-wide. So retirement is located in St. James, Tobalski and Haddon in St. Anne, Doctors Wood in Portland, Church Corner in St. Thomas, the Riverton in just the borders between St. Catherine and Kingston, Martins Hill in Manchester, and Myersville in St. Elizabeth. So we collect data on how much waste Jamaica would have been generating. For the year 2024, we would have collected 1,181,401.75 tons of solid waste. Riverton disposal site, which is the largest disposal site in the island, collects 725,296, and retirement 220,841. And these areas serve the island's most populated areas. So these disposal sites would have collected the highest. And it's important that we understand our waste composition so that we can allocate resource effectively and plan. So when you look at our organic waste, we have 37.2%, which is the highest. And then we'd have plastics would have been 16.8%. You have other waste materials such as cardboard, which is 9%, glass 3.5%, papers 6.5%. So let's look at the meat of the matter, which are the challenges and solutions in environmental health management. Okay, so the first issue would have been increase in waste generation. So we'd have realized that waste is increasing due to urbanization and the changes in consumption patterns. On our statistics, we'd have realized that between 2021 to 2022, the volume of waste would have increased by 3%. Between 2022 and 2023, it would have fluctuated to 2.5%. So what we would have done is to increase our fleet, and increasing our fleet would improve efficiency by collecting more waste. And when you look at 2023 to 2024, volume of waste increased by 9.4%. So this would have realized that how important increasing the fleet would have been, because between 2021 and 2024, we'd have collected approximately about 6.3% more of waste. So our next issue would be our capacity of disposal sites. So as I was stated in our waste characterization study, 37.2% of organic waste would have entered our landfill, and that is not a good thing. So what we have done at Solid Waste, National Solid Waste, is to develop composting initiatives by using the Citizens Guide. A copy would have been provided. It basically tells you how to create your own compost instead of sending it to the landfill. So we would have to divert those organic waste to create more space on our landfills. Our next issue would be health and fire risks. So we'd have realized that persons illegally dump waste on the roadside, and these ultimately can be breeding grounds for vectors and be an opening for disease such as leptospirosis. Another issue would have been spontaneous combustion. You'd have known that famous fire that took place in 2015 at Riverton. We'd have realized that this combustion would be a result of lithium batteries that would have been commingled with our regular solid waste. So when the truck drives over these lithium batteries, it opens and ultimately can start a fire. So what we have done is to improve our overall e-waste collection. So you can call the NSWMA for pickup of your e-waste collection. Usually if it's in bulk, it will be at a cost. And if it's just residential, you can go to any of the regional bodies where you can drop off these e-waste and we will store them for you properly. Our next issue would be insufficient infrastructure leading to more waste being sent to landfills. So what the NSWMA have done is to create projects that help this issue. So we have created the Integrated Community Development Project, the Rayton Recycling Project, the Northern Bell Plastic Recycling Initiative, and we'd have the informal pickers and landfill. So before I will go ahead, just to give a little more information on these projects, but just to highlight informal pickers and on the landfill, they're very integral in our system. What they would do is to sort and pick the PET bottles, and this would be a way of revenue for them and to improve their overall livelihood. And yeah, they serve a critical importance in our system. So let's look at our projects. So we have the Integrated Community Development Project, and what this project, the aim of this project was to improve our overall storage facilities so we can properly collect waste. So we'd have constructed around 120 concrete enclosures for waste storage. We'd have created 29 composting units for conversion of biodegradable waste into organic fertilizer. And we constructed 29 stations for storage and recycling of plastic bottles. And these units can be found in parishes such as Clarendon, Kingston, St. Andrew, and I have stated the respective communities beside them. The next project would have been the Rayton Recycling Project. And the aim of this project is to reduce marine litter along the Rayton Fishing Village coastline. And what this project do is to reduce volume of garbage within the gully. You'd have seen when it rains heavily, all the waste that would have been at the northern region would come down into our gullies. And this project was very important to us as we would have identified wardens in the community and we would give them responsibility to be the main person to collect garbage. So they will collect plastic bottles, and by identifying these wardens, we give them a sense of empowerment so they can encourage persons to do the same. And it really created a culture of separation of source. So between July 2020 and April 2021, approximately 33,580 pounds of PET bottles were collected. So our next project is the Northern Belt Recycling Initiative. And the project really, it aimed at sensitization towards plastic recycling, and it really encourages plastic separation at source in the Northern Belt of Kingston and St. Andrew. And since January 27, 2020, over 406,729 pounds of plastics or PET bottles were collected. So our next issue would be the lack of public awareness. We'd have realized that persons lack the knowledge about how to properly dispose and store your waste, we realize that persons just throw their garbage in the bin without properly containerizing it. So what we would have done is to create public awareness campaigns, such as the Clean Kingston Initiative. The most recent one is to Pass the Broom, and we'd have done school tours in primary schools and high schools, just to really promote sustainable waste management practices. And we raise awareness of environmental impact. So our next issue would have been illegal dumping, and this causes environmental pollution and increases health risks. So what we've done at NSWMA is to increase the number of enforcement officers and introduce bikes. So these persons will drive around in your towns, and if you see persons littering, you would stop them and we would fine them under the NSWMA Act. We also, I've mentioned public awareness campaigns. So instead of disposing of your bulky waste on the roadside, we would have encouraged so that we would pick up your garbage on our social media platforms, and this will really mitigate illegal dumping. And we also have the NSWMA Act. I'll speak more on the NSWMA. Oh, it's not there. Okay, so NSWMA Act is it's an app that can be found on the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. And what it really does is allow you to geotag your location as to where, if you have not received collection, if you see illegal dumping, you can take a picture, share the location, and our office, the head office, would have seen that this area is not getting a collection. So what we'd have done is to send out our collection units to go to these areas and to do the necessary pickups. So in conclusion, NSWMA is very integral in managing and reducing environmental health impacts. We have key initiatives to regularly pick up waste and to dispose of them. And we have public awareness campaigns. And to address those issues, we've tackled pollution, illegal dumping, and e-waste management to enhance overall sanitation and public health of Jamaica. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Please write down your questions so that we will entertain the questions at the end of the third presentation. All right, so we now turn to Ms. Lewis from NEPA to make her presentation. Give her a hand.
Some help, Dr. Scarlett. Need some help. Stop sharing.
Up share, where's your?
It's here.
We need Sebastian. Could I get Sebastian first, please? Yeah.
I'm not sure which of the parts, which point.
Try one of those.
Okay, is this one?
The top one?
And I just use the arrow keys.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. All right, I'm Fiona Lewis. Last year, this time, I was the manager for the enforcement branch at NEPA. Today, I'm in a new role, not necessarily a promotion, just a lateral transfer. And as Dr. Scarlett said, with a name like that, it should come with. Yes, but that is wishful thinking. All right, so today I will share with you a little bit on environmental health management in Jamaica and NEPA's role in all of this. Now, going through the presentations, you will realize that there are what may seem to be some overlaps in terms of the NSWMA's responsibility, WRA, NEPA, and if the Ministry of Health was here, you would have realized that there's some connection as well. Because at the end of the day, all of these entities share the responsibility of environmental health in Jamaica. From our standpoint, environmental health, for the overview, I will look at what is environmental health briefly, and our roles, the government entities with shared responsibilities and what those responsibilities are. So from our standpoint, environmental health is a field of science that studies how environment influences human health and disease. And for us, it refers to both the natural environment and the built environment, because at the end of the day, you cannot have a built environment without the natural environment. And a lot of times when persons think of NEPA, you only think of the natural environment, but we also have responsibilities for the built environment. The key roles, we have governmental roles, intergovernmental, community involvement, business responsibility, individuals, and academic institutions. In other words, every individual has a role to play when it comes to environmental health. Now, the government has its roles, monitoring and enforcement, policy making, public education. And a lot of times when things happen, persons will step back and say, what is the government doing? What is this person doing? Without realizing that as individuals, we also have a key role to play in environmental health. In the presentation from NSWMA, one of the issues had to do with garbage disposals. And from time to time, you will be driving and you see somebody just throw something out their window. They may be eating and they're finished and it becomes somebody else's problem. But the fact of the matter is that if everybody were to throw their garbage out the window, we would all be living in a dump. And also, when they do that, it becomes a problem for somebody else, because if it rains, it's gonna get washed down the drain and it enters our harbors, creating a bigger problem, or it may block the drains. But people don't understand that when you throw your garbage out the window, it doesn't just disappear. It becomes a bigger problem. And so every individual has a role to play. Now, the government entities with shared responsibilities were listed earlier. Some of who are here, some of who are not. So I don't think I really need to go into details in this one. So our responsibilities from a governmental standpoint, policy making, all levels, or at all levels, the government has a responsibility to create laws and regulations designed to protect public health and the environment. Now, from a NEPA standpoint, the key pieces of legislation is the NRCA Act, and it covers the permits and licenses regulations, wastewater and sludge regulations, air quality regulations. There's also the Town and Country Planning Act, Wildlife Protection Act, Watersheds Protection Act, Beach Control Act. There are others, these are the key ones. Now, under the NRCA Act, there are standards of codes and practice with respect to the protection and rehabilitation of the environment and the conservation of natural resources. So, for example, if there is supposed to be a major development or development in general, one of the requirements is for the developer to obtain an environmental permit from the NRCA, which is the overarching body for NEPA. And in some instances, they may be required to do what are called environmental impact assessments. And that basically just looks at what impacts this development will have on the environment. The environmental approvals that are received from NEPA stipulate conditions that must be met, and those conditions are geared towards environmental protection. And so those conditions will put restrictions on discharges to the environment. And it also governs or will look at disposal of substances that may be harmful to the environment. And a lot of times, some of these have to be done with collaboration with the NSWMA because they are responsible for the disposal of solid waste. The permits and licenses regulations, as I had mentioned earlier, sets out the types or categories of development that require environmental approvals. And in those environmental approvals, there are conditions outlined for the protection of the environment. And because the environment go hand in hand with health, if we protect the environment, we're automatically protecting health. The wastewater and sludge regulations speaks to the need for licenses to construct, operate, and so you construct, operate the wastewater treatment plant, and it stipulates standards that must be met for the discharge of treated effluent. And the standards vary because depending on where the discharge will go. For example, if a wastewater treatment plant will be discharging its treated effluent to a river, the standards would be more stringent than if the discharge is to a soakaway. If the discharge is going to be used for irrigation, where the possibility is that it will come in contact with human, then the standards are even more stringent. So depending on the receptor for that discharge, the standards are set based on that. For the air quality regulations, which is another piece of legislation that is geared towards health, there are also standards that must be met for emissions. So from time to time, you will pass those industries and you'll see smoke coming out of their stack. Whatever is being emitted, there are standards that those must meet. And so they are required to monitor periodically. At times, the agency will do verification monitoring to ensure that those standards are being met. Additionally, the agency also has air quality monitors that are placed at locations to measure population exposure, meaning what level of pollutants is the population or the public is being exposed to. And this is separate and apart from what is being emitted by the industries. Because while the industries are strictly regulated from an air quality standpoint, one of the gaps that we have is emissions from motor vehicles or from mobile sources. And so while we may not have direct measurements on motor vehicles, the other option is to measure the population exposure. So we will place, I think right now we have one in Constant Spring, Mandeville, Montego Bay, or major towns have air quality monitors that monitor the air pollutants. The regulation also speaks to emissions from unlicensed sources. So while it is that the licensed sources have standards to meet, it's a little bit more difficult when it comes to regulating those that do not or do not require a license. However, the regulations itself has what I call an umbrella section that speaks to the emission of air pollutants without a license. And so for somebody who is doing open burning in their backyard, they can be penalized for that. And you will understand that in a developed area like Kingston, that it is so densely populated, one of the restrictions that is aimed at protecting public health is that there should be no backyard burning or no open burning. All right, so now I move to the Wildlife Protection Act. And the Wildlife Protection Act is geared at the protection of water bodies containing fish. And under the Act, it is an offense to use dynamite and other noxious substances to kill or injure fish. And fish don't just mean the fish that we know, it means aquatic life in general, right? And there are sanctions against any person who knowingly buys, sells, or has in his possession fish obtained by such means. But outside of this, the Wildlife Protection Act makes it a criminal offense for the discharge of noxious or polluting substances into a body of water containing fish. So whenever we have spills whether it's from an industry or not, once it is in a body of water that contains fish, it doesn't even have to cause a fish kill. Once we can prove that 1, the substance is noxious, 2, it was discharged into a body of water, and 3, that body of water contained fish, the person can be charged, as long as you have sufficient evidence to support your claim. Under the Beach Control Act, and I know a lot of us go to the beach because it's a form of recreation, and so that also we have to have some level of control there. For entities that use the foreshore and floor of the sea for private, public, or commercial use are required to have a beach license. And that beach license again stipulates conditions that must be met, and part of that includes monitoring for water quality. Now, when we speak of the foreshore and floor of the sea, we speak of what is called a high water mark. So an entity whose business is on the seaside cannot prohibit you from walking along the shore as long as you're not on their property. So you have free access up to what we call the high water mark on a beach. And those entities, though they are on the shore, once they use the beach as part of their business, they are required to have a beach license. And a beach license just does not necessarily mean only for recreation. For those persons that build platforms or jetties, the pylons that they use to build those also have to, they have to get a beach license for that. So even if they have a jetty and it is not being used by individuals, the fact that they have those pylons in the water, they also have to have a license for that. All right, so the Watershed Protections Act, and I'm not going to get much into this because Mr. Clark is going to cover that area because, yes, he's going to speak a lot on that. But a watershed is defined as a land area in which rain falls and from which water drains into a stream or river. That's it in a nutshell. And the Watershed Protection Act of Jamaica is the main law that governs our watersheds. And the goal of that act is to conserve water resources by protecting land in or near watersheds. There are 26 watershed management units in Jamaica that we have on record, and there are restrictions of activities within those areas. And I'll leave that to Peter to give you some more details on. The map actually shows the major watershed management units that are across the island. So you may notice every single parish has a watershed management unit. So we look at the governmental responsibilities. 1, monitoring and enforcement, and that has to do with the compliance with environmental approvals, water quality monitoring, which I had spoken about earlier, wastewater treatment plants, which I mentioned earlier, beach water quality, air quality, and pollution incidents. Now, the image just below where it says river quarrying assessment, that image was actually taken about a year or 2 ago because there were some concerns that were raised by a company that was doing quarrying. They had a license for sand removal. However, they were doing it indiscriminately. And then in addition to that, there were some illegal operators on the river as well who were removing sediments from the river. And the challenge with that is that there are persons who use the river downstream. And so when you have contamination of your river at one point, everybody downstream will be exposed to that level of contamination. And so that is one of the investigations that we had to do and put some mitigation measures in place. We also do pollution incident response. We investigate incidents that result in negative environmental impact. And the image that you're looking at is actually real Jamaican. This occurred at the Kingston Container Terminal a few years ago where a vessel that was transporting oil, heavy oil, had an explosion on the port. And it created quite a mess. And so it took a lot. While it is that NEPA does not directly do the cleanup, we had to oversee to ensure that the cleanup was done properly. And in addition to that, to take the appropriate action, and at times may include prosecution. There was actually a hefty penalty on this one, but the owner of the vessel was, we basically had discussion, so we did not have to go to court, but there was some negotiation outside of that, and the matter was settled. But they had to do the entire cleanup, cover the cost of the cleanup, and whatever penalty was attached to that, they also paid. And in the aftermath of the hurricane, at some point we will have to speak of that. So NEPA does what we, in the event of a disaster, we do post-disaster assessment. So after every hurricane, so after Beryl, Ivan, and all the others, after each hurricane, we have to do post-disaster assessment. And that assessment includes assessing the damage to our natural environment. For example, our mangrove forests or mangrove areas would take a lot of beating from the hurricane. And as you pass, you may see trees that have been stripped, and over time they start dying out. The same thing happens to our mangroves. So we have to keep monitoring to see the damage and also to look at the regrowth. How fast is it regrowing? Is it growing as fast as we need it to? Do we need to do intervention? Because there may be instances that we will have to go in and do mangrove replanting. We also look at the pollution of our surface waters, again, primarily because you have people who are going to be using the water. We look at the impact on wildlife. Now, the hurricane has displaced a lot of our animals. So we have gotten an increase in calls of crocodiles showing up in areas that they would not normally be. And that is because they have been displaced as a result of the hurricane. And so we now have to do wildlife recovery. And also there are other areas of our natural environment that have been damaged. In this image, it's actually High Street, Black River, and you may notice that the entire coastline is gone. So now we will have to also look at the impact that that will have on the area itself. And also be cognizant of the fact that with the hurricane, there are also pollutants that may end up into our waterways. Public education, and I think this is my last slide, we involve ourselves in public education because we find that a lot of the times the public is not aware of how they need to operate or how they need to function as it relates to the environment and the role that they can play in basically being more responsible as it relates to the environment. One of the initiatives we had some years ago, you will recall, I think it was after a hurricane or a rain event, where there was a lot of damage in Portland Cottage. And part of that was primarily because they had removed a lot of the mangrove. And so there was no barrier when the wind started, there was no barrier to shield the community. And so there was extensive damage. And so what we did was to engage the community in terms of educating them on the importance of the mangrove and also engage them in the replanting process. And so now we have a re-established mangrove forest in Portland Cottage, and the community is now more aware of the importance because it is protecting them. We also do school programs. We work with the Ministry of Education and Culture to incorporate environmental issues in the school curriculum. And for this year, we have also embarked on the establishment or the re-establishment of environmental clubs in schools. And this is in a bid to educate our children, because we have to start educating our children to build a culture of environmental protection and environmental health. And we also have signature events such as the Environmental Awareness Week, World Town Planning Day, Air Quality Awareness Day, which was in, I think, October. And we also have our annual International Coastal Cleanup Day. Unfortunately for this year, our World Town Planning Day, which was set for this month, because of has been impacted. So I think it has been actually been canceled because of the hurricane. And I think that is it. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, so our final presentation comes from Mr. Clark. And then after Mr. Clark, we'll take some comments and some questions. You will not leave unless our person that answered. Appropriately.
Yeah.
So they are forward.
I don't think it's just, not even if it's a screen.
Hold on. Sebastian, come on.
Oh, he's coming?
Oh, no, I thought.
No, this is mine.
The man of the moment.
Should we hear?
Thank you. This is the date on that, 2021.
Hurricanes down the bottom.
Hmm?
Hurricanes down the bottom.
Oh, that's the movement thing. Hmm? It's a typo. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Peter Clark, the Managing Director of the Water Resources Authority. And I have to do a good presentation because a board member is here that is assessing me. He's a member of the board of the authority, Mr. Carr. So the Water Resources Authority came into being in 1995 as a result of the Water Resources Act. And officially, operations began on the 1st of April, 1996. So it is legislation that has been a part of our genesis. But the root was that a lot of people were always abstracting water by wells and so on, and they were doing it in a manner that was causing an environmental problem. Because you may or may not know that if you just abstract from wells willy-nilly and overpump and all of that, you can make your aquifers go saline, you can pull seawater in. And that issue was taking place. So it was recognized by the government of the day that something needed to be done to organize this whole thing. And so the Water Resources Authority was formed. Clearly, there was a need for a comprehensive policy framework to bring it all together. And the idea is for there to be a unified approach to management, not just with the WRA, but as Fiona would have said, with the collaboration of a lot of agencies and so on. So this act now gives the authority the mandate to regulate, allocate, conserve, and any other way manage water resources of Jamaica. And this now is freshwater resources. So our remit stops right at the coast. So the seawater becomes a NEPA issue. So if you want to exploit seawater for anything, then you don't have to speak to NEPA. But if you want to exploit the freshwater on or under the land, you speak to the Water Resources Authority. All right, so there are a number of regulators, of course, as you know. There's NEPA, WRA, Environmental Health Unit, utilities that we will be collaborating with, Water Commission, the National Irrigation Commission, and different ministries. All right, and of course, well, JET was invited, and they would have been here if circumstances were different. And of course, community users. But everybody is an actor and the chief stakeholder in water resources management, every single person, because of the fact that any one of us in our own little corner can do good or can do bad. And so we all are a part of that. We have to be ever mindful of the needs for providing water, for maintaining water quality, and for wastewater disposal. Because a lot of our wastewater disposal happens not out in an outfall to the sea, but either on land, which can then become contaminants or groundwater if it's not disposed of, it's not treated properly, or it's disposed in a waterway, especially a river. So that big Soapberry wastewater treatment plant that is out in St. Catherine off the Mandela, that treats almost all of Kingston's wastewater, gets disposed of after treatment in the Rio Cobra. And then the Rio Cobra goes out into Greenwich Bay. And that is the situation, right? So it is anticipated, it is hoped, and it has been so that the treatment from the plant is done to a degree so that that disposal is acceptable. And that disposal is monitored and managed by NEPA. So we obtain, compile, store, and disseminate water data and water quality data. So we have a database, and that database is there on our website, www.wra.gov.jm. And there, academics, developers, planners, all of these people access that website so that they can, if they need to have water resources data to be a part of the whole decision-making process. All right. So we monitor streams and rivers at roughly 129 points. So maybe one river is monitored in more than one location. So this is not 129 rivers, this is 129 points. And we monitor groundwater at roughly 287 points around the island. Largely for quality, which is very important for you as environmental health practitioners, but also for volume and quantity. So we have stream gauging stations, different types, and you may see some of these around the island as you travel around. You may see some officers in the river doing different exercises to, for instance, determine how much water is flowing today down a river in terms of the flow rate and the volume of flow. And it's a little bit of math, it's a little bit of estimate, but at the end of the day, it gives a good picture for us of what has been, the flow rate for rivers and so on. And of course, during times of flood, it becomes very important to be there. So right after not during the Hurricane Melissa, but right after Hurricane Melissa, our teams will mobilize to be out, measuring high water marks, determining how much water would have flowed down a river during the course of the hurricane, for instance, when it was at its peak, all of these things. And that's very important because you have to correlate. Remember now that all of our water was once rain, whether our rivers or our groundwater or our wastewater, it was once rain. And so what it means is that we have to find ways to correlate that incoming rainfall with what is going out. And by determining what is that difference. So if you calculate that incoming rainfall and it says X volume, and what is going out is Y volume, then X minus Y is Z volume, which is what you've retained. So it gives you an idea of how your aquifers are retaining. It's simply, in hydrological parlance, it's I minus O equals delta S. Input minus output equals change in storage. If input is greater than output, storage goes up. If input is less than output, if you are drawing off more than one reservoir than what is coming in from the river, storage goes down. Yeah? So, of course, we also inventory waste discharge into surface water and groundwater. We prepare maps, and I'll give you some examples of some of these maps. We're very interested in hydrology, in geology and hydrogeology, in soil types, in all the rivers and wells and sewage treatment plants and so on. All of these facilities, because of the potential for impact on your water resources, become very important for them to be monitored. So we do pollutant transport modeling. And this is now a very interesting and challenging exercise because formerly our rivers used to carry water. Now our rivers don't carry so much water. What you find is the sediment load has increased over time. So what we call it, what we say is that the spectrum of the flood has changed. So when it was used to be 90% water and 10% flood, 10% sediment. In some instances now, there's 70, 80, and 90% sediment. and 10% flood water, which means that the structure that you would have constructed to handle it can no longer handle it. Okay? We have seen, and you've probably seen a lot of instances where it is just a whole lot of stone and gravel that would come at a culvert, for instance. Everything is blocked up, and then everything just flows out all over the place rather than being in a conduit that takes it away, because the spectrum of the flood has changed. All right, seawater intrusion modeling. I spoke about why the double area was formed, which was the matter of saltwater intrusion in your groundwater and so on. All right, so this is something that we model and monitor. Pollution plume tracking, for instance, pollution from the bauxite industry. Over the years, it was none. When we started got into bauxite and everything, the easy go-to way of disposing of the waste product was to put it in some low-lying depression area and leave it and create a lake. Not considering that eventually it would percolate and infiltrate into the ground and affect the groundwater. So all of those groundwater in the Yorktown Wallens area is highly contaminated with caustic to this day, even though we've stopped using that procedure. A couple of decades now, we've stopped using it, but that is still there. So water quality control zones, aquifer protection zones, all of these things we'll deal with. And very importantly, abstraction licenses. So if you want to, whether you're NWC, NIC, a bauxite company, anybody who wants to drill a well and take water from the ground, you have to get an abstraction license. And if you're taking surface water and it's not for your local home, you have to get a license. So if you're taking surface water on a large scale, if you have a little chicken house with 10 chicken and a cabbage patch with 40 head of cabbage, that's fine. That's a domestic purposes. When you have 4,000 head of cabbage and 4,000 chicken, you're not going to eat 4,000 cabbage and 4,000 chicken any day soon. You're in the business. You're in the business. So at that stage, it means that you now would have to get the abstraction license. But if where I live, a river runs through my property, I take water, I'm fine. I'm not breaking any laws. I'm using it just for drinking and washing and the usual domestic stuff. All right. Hazard mitigation and disaster preparedness. We are a whole part of the whole thing with the ADPEM. We offer technical expertise. So for instance, the matter of closing the Bogwalk Gorge. It's not somebody just say, yo, hey, the river rising, I'm gonna collect the gorge. You don't go like that. It is coming from a scientific thing where people or gauges and so on are out there in the wider reaches of the watershed. Measurements are coming in, they're being modeled, and then from the model, you can say that, listen, the flat bridge will be overtopped in. If this rain continues for 10 more minutes or 20 more minutes or 30 more minutes, the bridge is going to be overtopped. We need to close the road. And then the thing takes place. We call ADPEM calls the NAA who own the road. NAA call the police who have the big gun can lock the road, and that is how it goes. It's just a process, all right? But it happens. The siting of facilities. I work very closely with my director there, Edson, in terms of landfills and what you call them again? Your transfer stations and all these kind of things, siting of cemeteries and all of these things, all right? So we produce maps, cemetery site location map. Red is good and green is bad in this case. Mining decisions, we're there when you want to determine if you want to continue mining in a particular area. Development decisions, we're there. Once you submit an application to the municipal corporation, they're going to send it to us to ask us for our opinion on whether it is safe to build that development out there. And we will say it's a floodplain area, or it is this kind of situation, and we recommend that you do this, or we recommend that you don't build. No, it's just a recommendation. It's not an order. So I don't need to say anything more about that, right? You understand what that statement means. It's a recommendation. We don't give the order. The order will come from the final person who's signing off, which is not even you, right? It's the municipal corporation. You also make recommendations. Exactamente. All right. Raw water quality standards. You all are environmental people, so you know about this and what people are looking for. So this is what we're looking for when it comes to raw water and what are our standards and so on, all right? Because at the end of the day, your raw water should be of a certain quality for you to know, bring it forward, propose it for treatment to the public, yeah? Then you have the final treated water standard when the public is going to consume it, which is another set of people who are interested in that. I think it's the environmental health unit and all of these people. And the producer themselves, whether it's the water commissioner or whatever, all right? So there's stuff that we look at. Very important for us is sodium, because sodium is an indicator of that thing that I was talking about back there, the salinization of your aquifers and so on. So sodium levels is an indicator of that. Chlorides is an indicator of that. Conductivity is an indicator of that. So we are very, very, we pay a lot of attention to that. So we talk about maps. So this is, for instance, a map of the groundwater and surface water sampling locations across the island. All right, so the red dots, you can see red? Let me show you some red dots. Some here. So red dots are alluvium wells, green squares, okay, are limestone wells, and then the blue triangles are surface water sampling stations. So between the different well sites, whether it's in the alluvium or in the limestone and the rivers and so on, a lot of sampling takes place. And our sampling, basically, the sampling regime is twice a year, right? So it's twice a year, once in the dry period, once in the wet period. Another thing that we produce maps of, for instance, is aquifer water quality. And again, we're looking at certain parameters that are important to us. It might not be important to others, but nitrates for sure. Because nitrates will tell you if you should be using the water or not, because nitrates, you know, that's an indicator for what the sources of nitrate are, chloride, sodium, all of these things, all right? So water-related impacts, increasing water pollution problems, all right? So just generally speaking, you know, algal blooms in ponds and surface water sources and so on, even the Mona Reservoir, all right? We just went through Hurricane Melissa. And we actually have, as a result of Hurricane Melissa, examples of the 5 types of flooding that would have come up. Riverine flooding. You may have seen pictures and videos of Bath in St. Thomas and the riverbank being eroded and people have to be moving out like real fast and everything. Same thing with the Wagwater and Broadgate in St. Mary. The Cambridge, the Sevens River broke its bank and has flooded out Cambridge and Anchovy. The New River has overtopped this bank. There's a big difference, between breaking the bank and overtopping the bank. So the New River has overtopped its bank, and also part of the Braze River overtopped the bank and has flooded out parts of Santa Cruz. You may have seen Santa Cruz, and it was just new for everybody down there. Because there was so much rain. That was the first time that the New River could not contain itself. Yeah, and it overtopped. So it didn't damage the bank. And if you 2 months time when you go back there, where the old riverbank was, shall be there again. So all the water did was, there was such a swell of water that it flowed over the bank. That's what we call overtopping the bank. Breaking the bank is when it busts out channeling on the bank and start running that way. That's a bigger challenge because you know, have to do river training. You can't just go and just fill it up back and expect that it's going to work. You have to know the river training to contain it. Yeah, so that's our issues. And the ones that are very topical right now are the depression floodings, The groundwater induced depression flooding and the surface water induced depression flooding. So my team have been basically sleepless since November 3rd, Monday, November 3rd, really monitoring flooding all over, especially the west and the central and the west in terms of depression flooding. Content is in the news, big time. So this is content. You can see a house here. Well, you can see that house is now covered, by the way. That house is now covered. I mean, that's just the last part of the apex of the roof there, but right now it's covered because between that picture and now the water has risen 3 feet. All right, it's rising in content roughly a foot a day. Quite phenomenal because we have not seen that before. So we went up there, we set up our gauges. You'll see examples of that. So again, this is content. So you can see a house here. You can see the water is up to the windows for that one. So it depends on where they are in elevation. All right. And we'll speak about what is happening there in just a minute. Just get the images out of the way first. All right. You can see a house there in the concrete top roof, concrete top house. This is a gate column here. That's a concrete top house out there. So we put gauges up. So we have put up gauges when we went there. So we put up a 13.3 foot gauge. And the water got up to 13.1. So we had to go back now and put another gauge on another post from there. All right? So because it's rising, and on the other post, on that post now, 4.4 feet equal the 13.3 feet. In other words, we didn't put it at 0 to continue. It was just convenient to put it on the post as best as possible. So it means that where this gauge is saying 13.3, the other one is saying 4.4. So all we have to do is just a little maths, which don't challenge most of us, and we can figure out how much it is continuing to rise. This morning, it is at 6.2, I think. Over the 4. Over the 4. So it started at 4. It started on the other gauge now at 4, which went up 3 days ago, and it is now at 6 point something. So it's risen roughly 3 feet in the last 3 days. All right, now I was on TVJ telling that it had gone down. When I was on TVJ Thursday morning, the reading had gone down. And I said it gone down. I said it's a little receding of the water. But the situation that happened was that, yes, it was receding because the gauge is dropping. But what happened was the water broke through underground because it's limestone, so it broke through underground in a conduit. And went and started rushing and filling that old cave and cavern situation until it filled it. And it started again back here. Yeah, which we anticipate. Because a lot of people say, boy, they hear like when they lie down in the bed, they really think they hear water underground at night moving. And some people say it's so like when they flush a toilet. And it's not guppy the mirrors. It's not guppy story. It is real. Because it's limestone, so it's conduit flow. Or it's not like the aquifer is more a conduit, is more a limestone aquifer, as opposed to an aluvium aquifer is a lot of sand and so on. So it's just a whole lot of, boggy kind of water underground. That in this case, you actually have channel flow underground, yeah? So that is the situation. So we've started the mapping, eh? So we've started the mapping. So this map is the change in situation between October 29, that's the day of Melissa, and November 5, which is recently. And you can see that a lot of what has happened in terms of flooding. The green dots are groundwater depression flooding, and the blue dots are riverine flooding. And you can see that it's right along the spine here. But a lot of that has happened there. Because in that area is where we have a lot of, is where our whole geology is such that we have a lot of limestone, we're under the Copy country right here. So all of this is limestone and so on. So you have these natural depressions already. With or without mining, you have these natural depressions, which is what the cockpits are, right? Different depressions. And so that is what is happening. So let me just pick up quickly. And one of the things that people have been interested in is because of the hurricane and the lack of water, water systems are down. A lot of people have come in with portable water treatment plants. Israeltech have come in with some, Food for the Poor have come in with some. There's another one with a name, a kind of Bible name. They've come in with a couple as well. They're doing some RO, reverse osmosis stuff and so on. They're all interested in where's the damage and where's some water that we can tap into to help people. So we produce this map like real quick, all right, to show them where the red dots is where wells are, the blue dots is where surface water sources are, and then we classify other wells in terms of whether they are pumping, whether they're non-pumping, whether they're abandoned. So the different colors going on up there, all right? So you ask now, what really is happening in that content and other places? So we have two types of depression. You have groundwater depression flooding where the groundwater is rising. This is a depression, yeah, and the houses and so on are in the depression, and the groundwater is rising, and then it breaks into the depression. That's depression, that's groundwater-induced depression flooding. And then you have surface water-induced depression where this is depression, but this is a mountain, and the water runs off the hills and the mountains and comes to the depression. So Newmarket, for instance, is surface water depression flooding. It's running off of the hills, all over the hills, and it's coming down, goes down, it drains away in sinkholes. But the problem there is that they cut a lot of bamboo and sticks for yam sticks. Because yam stick production is a big thing. You'll be surprised how much 1,000 yam sticks are used annually, right? especially in that region. But when they cut a stick, they don't want the whole stick. They want a piece from here to here. They don't want the little maga part at the top, and they don't want the part, the two fat parts. So they just leave those in the forest. And of course, they get washed down. So they come down and they block the sinkholes, bamboo and so on, block the sinkholes. Then the sinkhole can't drain the water away. So a lot of that happens with Newmarket. All right. With content now, it is the groundwater. There was so much rain before Melissa and then during Melissa that the aquifer got full. And groundwater, while the river flows at maybe 1 meter per second, groundwater moves at 1 meter per year. So it's advancing underground forward about 1 meter per year. But it's filling up with water because all this rain is falling, so it has to go somewhere. Since it can't advance forward because that is the rate that it passes through rocks, there's nowhere to go up. And the very same sinkholes that used to drain it out become inverted funnels and now become that inverted funnel to head. So it's almost like you have an artesian flow coming up out of the sinkhole. So that's what happened with content right there. Right? As I say, it is phenomenal for us in that the rate of flow is higher than we've seen, than we've ever measured. In 2002, it showed that it wasn't that fast. In 1977, it showed it wasn't that fast. So it's a phenomenal rate of flow, but nonetheless, it is still the same process taking place. And of course, you have the other situations now, the other end of the spectrum is the matter of droughts and lack of rain and sea level rise, as we spoke about, and so on. So clearly our big threats are sewage contamination, saltwater intrusion, and climate change in and of itself. We see that as a big threat. All right, so this is just a map showing, for instance, groundwater polluted areas and the different types of groundwater, different types of pollution. So the yellow is seawater pollution in your groundwater. The green is from the sugar factories and so on. The red is from caustic from bauxite facilities, and the brown is nitrates. Quite fitting that we made that brown. We were there in the matter of the discussion of the Cockpit Country Protected Area to come up with what the boundaries. A lot of work was done by NEPA. This is actually a NEPA map, yeah? But to show you that this is how we correspond and collaborate and correlate, because it's not just NEPA sitting at the table. Because NEPA within themselves know that they don't have all the expertise to come up with all the answers to all the questions that are going to be asked, or NSWMA or us. So we all sit at the table and collaborate and, you know, come up with what we're coming up with. And then eventually come up with a boundary and come up with, you know, where things can take place. All of this is just in maps that, this is what we call the hydrostratigraphy, which is the type of rock type in that same area where they want to do the mining and so on. So that you can have you're not guessing, you're scientifically making a response when questions are asked about, you know, why you're allowing mining in that area, why you're not allowing mining in the other area, you know, whatever it is, what you need to protect inside it. So we'd identify sinkholes, we'd identify faults, and so on, and say, no mining in fault zones, no mining within 100 feet or 100 meters of sinkholes or whatever. We declare aquifer protection zones. It's not a no-bill zone, it's a cure-bill zone. Our only aquifer protection zone is out in Portmore. And in that area, we're saying that, you know, this is what you do. You know, some of it is already built out, eh? But the solid line is showing the aquifer protection zone. And now any new developments inside there, for instance, the Greater Bernard Lodge development that NEPA was charged to prepare that whole development plan. That was their big job about 3-4 years ago, to prepare that Greater Bernard Lodge development plan. And in that, they would have the matter of putting in retention ponds and detention ponds, putting in whatever drainage and so on, keeping green spaces and everything. All of that is in that plan. And they didn't, maybe they could have, but they didn't sit by themselves and do it. It's something that we'd all sit at that table to determine. So to close, just to say, you know, in terms of wastewater, do we produce wastewater or do we produce wastewater? Because Kingston uses roughly 40 million gallons of water per day, which means that it produces 40 million gallons of wastewater per day, which is a resource. A lot of other countries, that is their secondary resource. All right? Singapore, for instance, it is their secondary resource, wastewater. So how long can we afford to dump wastewater? to dispose of wastewater rather than bring it back into the scheme of things, either in agriculture, irrigation, whatever the situation is. All right, so that is important. So agriculture is irrigation, aquifer recharge, industrial, some industrial water don't have to be, it don't have to be a good drinking water for cooling towers for air conditioning and whatnot. And even some amount of domestic augmentation. Now I know that we will we will not very easily get the average Jamaican to accept that the water that you're drinking is the water that somebody just flushed back there. All right? Coming in from a treatment plant. But in some countries, what they do is they take that water, treat it to a high degree, and put it back in their reservoir. And then in the reservoir, and it attenuates all the fresh water that's coming in, so it gets lost. When you put a meter inside, when you take a sample and you check, you find zero, because it's lost in the wider scheme of things. But at the same time, you have not dumped it. Yeah? You can't accept that one either. Well, let me ask you a question. Anybody drink water downtown? No? Please drink some water downtown. Because you'll be drinking water that is high in nitrate, which is what we're talking about. But was high in nitrate. And what they've done is these wells are closed because we're high in nitrate. You can know this. So they're going to take these wells, draw them back into service, like the way the post office, and the way the water commission components, so they brought them back into service. But what they've done is they've attenuated that there are a lot of fresh water coming out of water reservoir and the park and well and so on. So if you go there and you check it, you go down to and you work up all and you go by zero. But by itself, you would have said, Peter would have said, all right? So there's ongoing discussions that's happening with us, NEPA and others about wastewater reuse, all right? So going forward, just remember, it's more than water. It's about the watersheds. So we have to reclaim, we have to reuse, just by how we deal with packaging. And virtual water is a whole nother concept. We have to restrict, we have to reduce, we have to reserve, and we have to redirect. All right, so those are my 6 R's. Okay? And so reclaim the water component, like out of surface water runoff. Surface water runoff, there's a word in there. Water. There's water in surface water runoff. Wastewater, there's a water in wastewater. So we have to reclaim that water component. Reuse that water component so that we can reduce the demand on really pristine fresh water. All right? Reduce that fresh water demand. Reserve that fresh water for some other better use. Can you imagine you're pumping out good clean water out of the ground to trip back on the ground to irrigate cane or to irrigate what I'm doing down, what I'm doing down there for the beer, what I'm planting again? Cassava or whatever. You don't need good fresh water for that. So we're using no, but you don't need that. All right, so these are considerations. At the end of the day, every drop of water is and shall be precious. Thank you.
Amen, brother. All right, so first of all, I'm looking for a set of keys. Office keys. Okay, good. All right, so we have just witnessed some very excellent and fluent presentations. It shows us that our agencies in Jamaica are doing very good work in trying to protect the environment. The unfortunate thing is that the average Jamaican does not know about the different kinds of work being done by these entities. And they judge these entities by the people they come in contact with out there, all right? So I'm going to invite you to make any comments you have and to ask whatever burning questions you have. And when you ask a question, please indicate which of the presenters you would like to respond to these questions. So we'll have about 20 minutes for question and answer. I'm certain all the questions won't be answered in this room, but you can follow up with the agencies to get all the answers you need. So let me thank the presenters again and to invite you now to answer the questions.
Yes, Dr. Scarlett.
Hello,
Yes.
let us start with the people online. Good afternoon. We have
Yes.
forgotten you.
Yes, good afternoon,
You
Dr.
have a
Scarlett.
question?
Yes, I
Yes,
do.
please go ahead.
Very good presentations. Commendations to all the presenters. I have a question for the last presenter, the one who presented on water. Is it Mr. Peter Clark? That's his name?
Yes, you're correct.
Okay, right. I wanted to find out about Uaton. Uaton, so he had mentioned Uaton with water high in nitrates. Nitrates, that's what he had mentioned, Mr. Clark? Nitrates?
No, caustic,
It's caustic. Oh, caustic soda, right. So I wanted to know what can be done concerning that water, and do the people actually drink that water?
No, they don't drink that water. Wells in that area are all industrial wells. So in the bauxite companies, they have wells in the same aquifer pulling from it, and they're using it for their industrial purposes because they use a lot of water in the manufacture of aluminum, and different operations that they have there. So no, none of that water is being used for domestic purposes. What can be done with it? You have to leave it to time. Time fixes, time heals all wounds and nature heals itself. So with time, as rains continue to fall over the next decades, that rainwater will percolate and infiltrate into the groundwater and will help to attenuate whatever contaminant is there. And one day, if nothing else is added to it, then it will be clear water. Same thing with the Ligani aquifer that we sit on right now, where we all are, which is high in nitrate. The first step was to basically sewer the city as best as possible. So a lot of the sewage is now flowing west to Super, as I've said, so the band, a good friend to my left, and her team have gone through and forced the municipal corporations to ban any construction of any soak-away pits, absorption pits no more, which is the big problem. And so as you stop that and then rainfall and over decades, even this aquifer will clear up.
Okay. That's it.
Okay,
Any
thank you
other
so
questions
much.
from-
Appreciated.
Okay, my brother, you have to speak up loudly so we can hear you.
I'm just wondering who the mayor's been under retirement benefits have been affected by this.
That's a very good question, but we haven't had any reports, major reports about any infrastructure, destruction or anything like that. So it's functioning as regular.
I had a conversation yesterday with some members of the landfill team, more specifically as it relates to Myersville, more so for St. Elizabeth. Myersville is actually one of our smaller disposal sites. And because of the amount of damage that has taken place within St. Elizabeth, all of the waste from that area, in terms of houses that were broken down, roofs that would have gone, trees that have cut down, all of that is actually going to Myersville. So we are actually in the process of opening some more acreages down there, based on some conversation that we're having, because we are seeing that there's going to be a specific need for more space currently.
So that leads me, but first let me say, Dr. Scarlett, thank you very much for arranging this for all the cities that need that. very interesting and worthwhile. So thank you, Dr. Scarlett. But just following and all our presenters what I had a question on that. Well, really was supposed to never. They have been on the advice committee on the cleanup. Give your viewpoint in this whole issue. Because looking at even in speaking, I've been to Westmoreland, so travel a whole bit from St. Catherine to Westmoreland, and I've seen and I'm hearing persons even overseas saying they're going to have to be burning. So has NEPA done any been a part of the conversation in that in advice on in the cleanup effort? And you mentioned Mr. Carr on the increase in land space, because that was one of my things that he said as well. Will there be, because the debris, the solid waste that has been created by Melissa is boy, right? I've seen the houses flattened. But persons are looking, I can tell that persons are looking at burning. And why that might not have happened in some of these areas yet is because there's still water left. But burning is going to be.
So we have been part of the conversation, but we also have to look at the fact that the country is in a crisis. And it is not everything that we will be able to control. So we have to basically strike a balance, because if we are too stringent in what we're doing, which we should be, we may end up creating an even bigger problem, because when you look at the volume of waste, the NSWMA will not be able to manage. And we will not, the NSWMA or even also regulators may not necessarily be able to go into every little corner of Jamaica to see it don't burn. But if they don't burn, then you end up with
potential and people not being.
exactly. And in addition to that, one of the challenges too is that you have dead animals, and in some cases they might be dead bodies there that they have not yet found. And so it's a matter of us as government regulators coming together to be able to strike that balance, because it cannot be that we are holding out in one end and we're creating a bigger problem on the other side. So it has to be a balance, and that is what we're working.
So will we then have to advise people accepting that and then advise on saying for this time, or maybe even create areas within communities and say, okay, for this time we will, and you can do like the board houses, you know, those things, clothes that are no longer, because there's some pieces of clothes that are clothing and so on that people can't wash out the mud and can't wash out stuff. You know, I had the unfortunate opportunity of watching a lady picking out from in Luanda there, picking out her pieces of garments and to see, and she had two piles. I guess one was what was she was gonna wash out, and one she wasn't going to, and picking up and turning and looking, if this makes sense. You know, it makes sense, wash out this if there's too much mud and that sort of thing. You know, heartbreaking, but is it that we're going to have to guide people and not just have persons just in their own, on their own, just burning and burning everything?
Yes, definitely, and that is where we will have to have that discussion with the mayor as well, because from a NEPA standpoint, we do not know how much the NSWMA can manage. And so it has, again, this is where it comes back to the collaborative effort. What can be collected, what can be discussed. But they are expert when it comes to this.
I'm just hoping that we get to the table sooner rather than later. Before persons get to it themselves, and then we try to contain it. And manage this afterwards. We're seeing it, so critical things to keep coming. So we get to it before and vice versa before. Because some people won't have to do that. I'll just hold NSWMA one of the things and I'm upset. I am upset. I'm upset with Nefa too. I'm upset though. I'm upset because I have a book here, but I'll just, reel them up. You say that, you have the lithium battery disposal. Who knows? And how do we know? Because we have so many avenues of, getting things out there. Our schools is one thing. We've all talked about developing school programs and so on. I want to give you a piece of advice. When you're doing that, don't start at the high school. I'm a school nurse. Don't start at the high schools. Start at early childhood, basic schools. Start there. Whatever programs you're developing, have one, and your major program must be that for the early childhood education. Because all the parents in here can attest. When their 3, 4, 5-year-olds come home and say, teacher said, they dare not change it or do anything else. So if you get, and we miss that opportunity a lot of times when we're developing programs, we're doing it for adults and high schools and so on, and we miss the opportunity that we hear and we try and we do 1 week and then you forget about it. These little ones are going to continue to be in your skin about it. They're the ones that are going to affect the change at home. So when you're developing programs, which you need to, because the public is not seeing it, try to utilize prime spots in the news, in school challenge time, those things that people will come off cable and watch on TVJ or CBN. You try to utilize those spots, and we're not here because we don't know. Well, thieves broke in and robbed us of a couple computers that I had stored at home trying to find where to dump them. So we need to know where, because when you're I have several batteries that need to go out, and pretty soon, what was gonna happen? I'm probably just gonna close my eye and just put them in the garbage. But there are persons out there who want to do the right thing, who know that they shouldn't go in, because it said so on there that they shouldn't go in their regular garbage. But if we're not given the opportunity to exercise that, then we just end up going with the other. So the public campaigns have to be more on target and doing, because then we just throw good money after bad. It's work about doing the trucks, increasing the fleet. But then within that time of the trucks coming in, the increase, your solid waste increased 6.5%. So the fleet that was ordered to manage the old now became, which is why we still have the issue of persons complaining that we're not getting the pickups, and then government says we ordered and we got X amount of new trucks. But they're just managing the old problem, not the increase of the problem. And recycling of cardboard, that needs to be something that is more widely looked at, and also possibility of developing guidelines for companies to, because I've seen it where they're developing the garbage disposal shops, stores, and so forth, and there you can tell there's no guideline there for how they should construct those. So that's an area that the NSWMA and your partners could look at, so that whenever a store or building, these buildings are going up, there are regulations of your disposal areas, where they should be and what they should be, what they should look like.
Thank you.
Just being behind on one of the points you made, we do agree that the education should begin at the basic school, and we have actually started that. Our public education branch is now working with the early childhood commission, right? And we have started with schools on the eastern side of the island. So that is a program that we have started. We know we have a lot more to do, but we have actually started with the early childhood commission. What I spoke about earlier was the environmental clubs. Those we geared towards the high school, but we also have a program for the early childhood and the primary.
Excellent.
On that, thank you everyone, for the panelists for the excellent presentation. I think 2 of the 3 speakers spoke about, the importance of education. And I think one of the things that we have to really focus on is the importance of education. And I think education is not just about the academics, but it's also about the one of the problems that they're having is public education, and we spoke about collaborative effort in terms of getting this information out there. I'm not sure, that's why I'm asking, are there any plans in place currently or in future where these three key stakeholders have plans in place to do a mass media campaign? They said they started with early childhood, but is NSWMA a part of that plan as well with water as well?
No, I
Or
can't
is
say,
it done in silos?
I can't say that in terms of that, those are correct silos. Where we do support each other is when we have any mass outreach. This is, for instance, the expo. We were having one on the 31st of October, but that got scuttled by Melissa. And NSWM was going to be present, Never was going to be present, other stakeholders, JET, all of these kind of stakeholders were going to be present. And we normally support, there's a big support system that we have for each other when it comes to this. When NEPA is having anything, they just send the email, they know that we will be there with our PR team, with our booths and our people and all of that. Scientific Research Council, they're having something, they think it's good too, but you know.
I agree.
It's
So the
worth-
people on the
that's how
ground
it
need to
works.
feel it as well.
Yeah.
That is the three of us bonding together with
Yeah,
Ministry of
yeah.
Health, Ministry of Education.
Yeah.
And just a final thing, because I know we're wrapping up. This for NSWMA, you mentioned, I was looking for the app. Is the app functional? I tried it on my phone. I tried it on somebody else's Android, but I can't find it to geotag. I'm not sure if it's done right now because of everything that's happening. But I think it's a great idea. I didn't know it existed. So it's just things like that to really get out there so that we know that, oh, this is actually a thing. So I felt like, you know, really and truly, with the, as you mentioned, was one of the issues that you guys are having, really getting the information out there. And they said the increased fleet, but I don't know if any collection schedules. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be on the app. Like if each community knows reliably when the fleets are coming, the timing, timing probably can be iffy, but the days that okay, X, Y, Z, so that we are looking out for the just because just driving up on a road coming up, I was like, why is so much garbage out on the roadside? I guess it probably put a hole in the apartment, so they just dispose it on the road right by Ottawa, the turn to go to Ottawa right there. Over 30 bags of garbage with other debris. So things like that. We probably don't know the schedule. They probably got frustrated. It's probably getting smelly. So if we could know where to reliably get the collection schedule, so that we can like track as well. But the app is a good thing, but it's just that I couldn't find it today. But, okay.
So I must apologize. Seems like the app is done at the moment. To talk about not lacking awareness, we try to appeal to the younger generation. So we have social media such as Instagram, Facebook. So you can do check these platforms to see the information, and we do provide guidance as to the things that you're asking about. As for the collection schedule, the collection schedule is there for each region. Right, so when you go on the website, you will see the region, you select Kingston and Angel, the area of your concern, and then you can look in the list as to the area, and then it will tell you the specific date for collection.
Okay, and this is posted on social media platforms.
The NSWMA website.
Just on the website.
Correct.
Okay.
And we talk about social media as well. The different regions would all have someone who is responsible of their social media account, and periodically they would do posts based on collection schedules.
Okay.
One of the region that does that a lot better than the others is the SPM region, and they would post that there's collection to be had in this community and this state. So there are ways in which that we're trying to get that information out. However, it is not as widespread as we want it to be, and we know that we need to get to a lot more people than we are now, and we're working on that.
Definitely. And the last thing, is there anything in the works about engineer landfill? I'm not sure if you mentioned it, if it's something that we're looking towards or not, even though the fact with this groundwater and the pressure and all of these things now, if it's something that is on our minds.
So
It's unsightly, especially the one in Church Corner as you enter St. Thomas. So we get this big, what you call it now, this big new town center, and as you peep your head, this big mass of garbage. So it kind of take away from the sight of, what you're trying to develop.
All right, so for the last couple of years, there's a lot of things that has been going on in the waste management sector. The Prime Minister would have put together a team called the Enterprise Team that is actually looking at an integrated waste management architecture for the entire island. A point of note for that specifically, and it would have been said by the Prime Minister in different spaces and even on the campaign trail that I gave during the election, that one of the things that he's looking for, possibly through the integrated waste management framework, is the possibility of going to waste the energy. If we're actually going to waste the energy, there wouldn't be that much need for a lot of engineered disposal sites across the island. More so one or two, just take the bottom ash from that, which would have been burnt from the waste energy that they're considering. So there's conversations still going on in that respect. Based on the plans, it is the possibilities of 2 waste energy facilities and 1 engineered disposal site, interspersed with roughly about 8 or 9 transfer stations to augment the overall collection. So that is what they are currently looking at. The official sign off to go into that direction has not been given, but there are still works that is being taken place in that regard.
Okay, thank you so much.
2 more questions? Are there any other questions from the person online?
Yes, I have 2 questions, please.
All right, so we need to wrap up in about 5 minutes. Go ahead, your question.
Right along that line of education, we have, for example, I was trying to figure out who I should call, because in my area, they have a lot of persons, or the older persons, who are throwing garbage into the gully. And it's not just that they're throwing it into the gully, which is rental. The whole area has a stench to the back side of what we call it. They're throwing pampers, everything, and they're building up. Even the little ledge before it reaches the gully is built up with garbage. So we were trying, multiple persons from here were actually trying to figure out who to call. I actually tried calling number, but I wasn't getting through. The phone kept ringing. So I wasn't getting through. So I was wondering, should I call NSW? Who should I really call? Because it's both sides that address me. To the point where a lot of residents put together money. We made a huge garbage container, like high, like far taller than like 7 feet high, open as me. And still, that specific person, we spoke to her multiple times, she was really, it's not even full. It's not like it reached the old, the way it's full enough.
Sorry, is that a concrete structure?
No, it's not. It's like aluminum, and the bottom has the normal mesh where yeah.
So how would we put waste in it? You would have to throw it over or take it 7 foot?
It actually has, it has a door as well, but you have to be careful because if it's full, you can't open that door right there.
I would
Install it on me. So
I would suggest though that before coming to start to build these receptacles, to speak with this National Service Management Authority. That can provide guidelines on these things. Because let me tell you why. Sometimes we try to fix a problem, we can create a bigger problem, right? But it's commendable that citizens are trying to do things for themselves. I don't know if the agencies here need to advertise their numbers more or have numbers that when people call their answers. You know?
Because we do the 979.
All right, so thank you for that question. Yes? You have to speak from the
it with in terms of fines? I think the NSWB has fines attached to that.
There's some concern. In terms of the warrants or the people who one where they do have enough people. Because if I were the force and something, you could do that. You can know the answer to that. Yes, yes.
So they have some vehicles recently, right? Enforcement.
Commentary about the person like, ask no questions, and we need to wrap up. Something good, right?
All righty, thank you so much.
Go ahead.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My question, I had several questions, but I'm just gonna ask two questions. One to Mr. Clark of the WRA and Ms. Phipps of NSWMA. So, to Ms. Phipps, I'll just continue from, I think that was Nakisha. Is there an approach for the management and maintenance of gullies? Like, is there a policy in place? Or does the National Solid Waste Act speak to the maintenance and management of gullies? And if not, is there any plans to put any legislation in place or at least develop a standard for the management of these structures? So that's my first question.
Okay, so for drains, to the development drains within development, there are standards and guidelines for those. Those have been developed by the National Works Agency. They are made public and they are, the calculations for those drains are part of the considerations when the development is being approved by the municipal corporations. Without a doubt. For gullies, again, generally speaking, gullies again fall under the remit of the National Works Agency because it is their job to contain floodwaters wherever they are or lead floodwaters away wherever they are. So in terms of maintenance, that is a matter of their own schedule, their own budget, and their own, dare I say, will? I dare not. I did not say will. That is a matter of their, it's in the remit of the National Works Agency. For gullies, for instance, Sandy Gully in Kingston, McGregor Gully, all of these gullies are gullies that are under the operation of the NWA, and the maintenance of them also are under. So when we had the breach of the gully, of the Sandy Gully at Constant Spring, right beside, right back of that plaza there where they're trying to restore the wood. Marketplace. So when we had that breach after the booster rains, for instance, NWA had to get in there the local plan and so on. So that is an NWA agreement.
Next question, they said they had two.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I do know that across, globally, there is some concern about the levels of potable drinking water. And even though Jamaica is a land of wood and water, we already have evidence that there's not enough potable drinking water, especially in rural areas. Is there a concern now by the Water Resource Authority about the levels of drinking water that we have in Jamaica? For example, you had mentioned that, we have increased sedimentation in a lot of the rivers. And so I was just wondering, what does our plan look like to mitigate loss of potable drinking water for future generations or even in the next 5-10 years? And is it something that we need to worry about now?
All right, one, Jamaica is still a land of wood and water. The fact is that we have 6 times more water available as groundwater for us to exploit annually than all the rivers that you know in Jamaica combined that flow to the sea annually. Phenomenal amount of water is on the water.
No matter the quality is suspect or known to be not up to standard in some areas. For instance, we spoke about the water area or the US and so on. Is there something to worry about? Yes, certainly to worry about, especially for surface water sources that are used for your water production. So your whole river that used to be a bigger river than it is now, is now a smaller river that was there. And others. So one of the problems right now is not that there's a shortage of water, it's a shortage of distribution. So where the people are, where the water are, don't come together. Okay? A lot of our water is on the north, and at the same time, a lot of our population, our largest population centers on the south. Kingston, Spanish Town, Portmore, Mayfair, those are the four largest population centers. Alright, so what it means is that what I think we have to look to is how to move water from where it is to where it's needed. Alright, the whole river is 20% reliable river. And that roughly falls in a dry period, it falls roughly 80% of its flow. And it is a very dependent as one of the two sources coming in, one of three sources coming into Kingston, but one of four sources coming into Kingston. Alright, while the river going up, the 80% river, it only falls 20%. That means that sometime in the future, we have to look at how we can shunt water around the country. And that has started with the water commission putting in the major mains. So right now they can move water from Ocherus almost to the ground. Same water drop. They can move it because they have the whole connectivity. That connectivity process or exercise needs to continue so we can move everything right around. Yes, in our future, we'll be looking, as I said, one of the things was that we're looking at the fact that we have to recognize that there's water resources and other things other than the fresh drinking water we just spoke about. So to reserve that fresh drinking water, it means that we will have to use more of our wastewater for purposes that it is useful for. Okay, so it means that for agriculture again, for industry. And the other thing is the surface water. Most of our surface water runs out because it is high turbidity and they can't take it into the Mona Reservoir. So all of that water that was in the other day, it bypassed Mona Reservoir because the turbidity is so high. Because the life of a reservoir is dictated by the rate of sedimentation of said reservoir. Right, so the more the sediment builds up, the shorter the life of the reservoir is. And so the reservoir was built in the late 40s. You know, in the 20s, 18 years later. Right? So, yeah, the structures that we have, they're over permitted down to 2 years, they are 100 years old. 2 years, they are 100 years old. The structures that we have were built for population of 50 to 60 years ago. Even with some forward thinking, that means that we have that move forward. And yet, somewhere around the we can't do that. We can't try to do our thing.
Okay, so we'll find out the question.